20 years before El Chupacabra famously terrorized Puerto Rico, El Vampiro de Moca had its own spree of slaughter. Death and high strangeness would continue for 6 months until abruptly stopping, leaving many unanswered questions. Welcome back, mammals. As promised, the prequel to my Chupacabra video. The terror began in February of 1975, where several livestock were turning up dead in the barrios of Rocha and Moca PR. Some of the first victims included 15 cows, 3 goats, 2 geese, and a partridge in a pear tree. I'm just kidding. Last victim was a pig. The farmers had their animals examined by autopsy, and they were found to be mysteriously drained of blood, with puncture marks in their necks or torsos. Local authorities chalked the deaths up to wild dogs. However, there were a couple problems with this. None of the bodies were eaten. Also, how come there were so many victims all at once? Certainly a large pack of wild dogs would be spotted by somebody. In addition to that, dogs don't drink blood. Also, several of the farmers claimed their pens were far too high for any dog to jump into or jump out of. Not to mention, there weren't any tracks that were found. March 7th, 1975. A man named Ray found one of his cows dead. The cow had deep wounds on its skull and other wounds and scratches across its body. The cow was basically massacred. And by this point, we're a month into the strange killings, and the total number of victims has hit 30 animals. March 15th, 1975. A man named Cecilio Hernandez found 34 of his chickens all dead, when just the day before, he was feeding them and caring for them, and they were all very much alive. Cecilio believed El Vampiro de Moca had come in the night and killed all of his chickens. March 18th, 1975. Moca vampire assaulted a farm owned by Hector Vega. Over the course of 2 days, he had 12 dead goats, 7 injured goats, and 10 goats were missing. The 12 dead goats had puncture marks in their necks, and they appeared to be drained of blood. We're only in month 2 out of 6 months of terror, and already the bodies were piling up. And by this point, local authorities were finally taking the citizens a little bit more seriously about the animal deaths and were attempting to investigate. Absolutely nobody's livestock were safe from this monster, and that included government officials like the treasurer of Moca, who lost several livestock to the beast. March 23rd, 1975. A man named Felix Badillo found one of his piglets dead, with strange puncture marks in the side of its head. The piglet was also missing an ear, and according to an expert from the University of Puerto Rico, the ear appeared to have been surgically removed. Felix had a guard dog standing by outside the pig pen. However, the dog appeared to have never alerted anybody or even realized anything was wrong. If something did get by the dog, whatever it was, it managed to kill the piglet before anybody noticed. March 25th, 1975. Late one night, a man named Juan was walking home when he encountered a strange feathered creature. It scared him, so Juan started throwing some rocks at it. I too throw rocks at strange creatures I've never seen before, because what could go wrong? Well, it turns out things went wrong. This feathered creature apparently took flight and went right after Juan. He ducked under some bushes, and then later ran to a neighbor's house for safety. Juan was not the only one to see a strange bird-like creature. A woman named Maria one night heard something tapping on her roof and at her window. She went out to investigate and saw a strange bird-like creature that took flight. It let out a horrible noise that scared Maria almost half to death. There were some in Moca that started to wonder, was this bird creature responsible for the livestock deaths? By April of 1975, the areas of Vallardo, Carrizal, and the outskirts of San Juan also reported strange livestock deaths. Clearly, the Moca vampire was traveling across the island. Police continued to investigate, and they apparently had a few leads. Police were under the assumption that all of these strange animal deaths were being caused by people, which led some locals to think that maybe Satanists were involved, while others thought maybe vampires, like actual vampires. April 2nd, 1975, the murderous monster of Moca struck another farm, this time a farm owned by Izaro Melgar. Vampire of Moca killed 12 rabbits and 8 goats. Zaro was afraid that his livelihood would be at stake. So he set out poison traps, and he had several of his neighbors help him keep watch in the night. Pizarro was afraid that the vampire would return and kill more of his livestock. And while him and his farmer buddies tried their best to stay up all night, unfortunately they were only able to stay up till 3 a.m. Once everyone went home, and the following morning came, more of Pizarro's livestock were found dead. Clearly this unknown predator must have been watching them and waiting until everybody was gone before it struck. This obviously pissed off Pizarro a lot, so him and his farmer buddies were determined to stay up the entire night and catch the monster in the act. Probably this time taking shifts, so not everybody would be passing out by 3 a.m. Taking shifts is probably something they should have done the first night. But anyway, April 5th, 1975, Pizarro and his farmer buddies were on patrol, and around 12:30 a.m. they heard a loud, terrifying sound. They went to go investigate, and as they reached the area, they saw a dark figure in the distance leaving the area. Now it was too far and too dark for them to make out any details, but when they did approach the area where the figure was, they discovered several more dead goats. It's as if the Moca vampire was taunting them by letting out a terrible scream before dipping out of the area. Once again, people were getting pissed off and really wanted the government and local authorities to do something about all the killings. All the strange deaths were spreading more and more across Puerto Rico, and let's be honest, the police really couldn't do much. They didn't really have anything to go on, and they really didn't know where the monster was going to strike. Even with patrols and other people staying vigilant, nothing could be found. No culprit could be caught or stopped. Fear was spreading across Puerto Rico. May 13th, 1975. Another strange creature sighting. This time, one without feathers. Jose Santos is our witness for this one. Claimed to have seen a creature with a round head, large eyes, and a hairy tail. It also apparently growled like a small dog before making its exit. Jose believed this creature to be non-native to Puerto Rico because he'd never seen anything like it in his entire life. As we entered June, the killings continued up until August, when they just suddenly stopped. The Moca vampire disappeared just as quickly as it appeared back in February. What was this mysterious creature, and where did it come from? Well, some believe maybe it came from the stars above. The strange animal deaths and weird creature sightings were not the only strangeness going on in Puerto Rico in 1975. There were also several UFO sightings around the same time the Moca vampire was slaying animals. One UFO sighting involved a cigar-shaped craft that was spotted over a home in Coupé. Witnesses described the cigar-shaped craft having rectangular windows emitting a bright yellow light. As this craft hovered over this home for about 45 minutes, eyewitnesses had essentially all the time in the world to observe it. The following morning, some researchers went out to investigate the area and they found burnt vegetation, leading some to speculate maybe the craft landed. Maybe to pick up or drop off a bloodthirsty creature. Who can say for sure? One of these sightings involved 3 UFOs flying over Fayaro. According to witnesses, 2 of those UFOs kind of looked like stars. One of the witnesses was an astronomer, and after observing these UFOs, he claimed that they looked unnatural and they didn't look man-made. Even early on during the Moca vampire's spree of slaughter on March 12, 1975, a man named Luis Torres was out with his son and his son's wife when they spotted a UFO. The UFO emitted flashing lights and was apparently flying over several fields where multiple dead animals were found. And then you have several UFO sightings all occurring on the same night on May 17, 1975 in San Juan. First, you had a few women that were out on a porch when they spotted a large, bright yellow light moving unnaturally in the sky. Then you had a couple from their apartment witness a UFO giving off a bright red light flying past their building, and as it flew past, it shut that light off. And finally, you had several witnesses spot a bright UFO flying over Fort San Cristobal. With all these UFO sightings around the same time the Vampire Moca was killing animals, kind of makes you wonder, were they related? Or is this all a coincidence? Remember Luis Torres, who I previously mentioned had that UFO sighting? Well, in March of 1975, he killed two 6-foot Puerto Rican boas that he claimed were about to kill one of his 600-pound cows. Many at the time believed that these snakes may have been responsible for all the strange deaths up until March, and he was kind of hailed as a hero. Except we all know that the killings continued until August, so he didn't really get the culprit. On top of that, it's important to note that a 6-foot boa would not attempt to devour a 600-pound cow, nor would two snakes attempt to work together to eat a 600-pound cow. Snakes also don't drink blood or cause the wounds that were described by several witnesses. Even if the snake attempts to eat the animal and fail, there wouldn't really be the kind of puncture marks described. Boas especially, well, sure, they'll bite their prey and latch onto them, but they crush their prey to death, and their needle-like backwards teeth leave different markings that were found on the victims. But another animal that doesn't suck blood, but could actually cause the wounds described by witnesses, would be dogs. If you recall from my chupacabra video, dogs were actually a pretty good fit for a lot of the dead animals. Dogs have the ability to create the puncture marks that were seen on animals' necks and torsos. And if you recall from that video, sometimes dogs can get into like this little kill-happy frenzy where they'll just murder multiple animals but not eat their bodies. Some of the farmers said that there's no way a dog could have gotten into their pens. However, depending on a dog's breed, it can jump as high as 6 feet, and sometimes they can even go further if they can bounce off of something, a wall or a crate, or even if they can get their paws in some fencing, they can hop further or over, get into a pen, kill a bunch of animals, and then hop out. Dogs could also potentially dig a hole underneath a fence and push in that way, murder a bunch of animals, and then leave. However, it's important to note that this whole phenomenon wasn't as detailedly recorded as, say, the chupacabra stuff. So I don't actually have anything about any farmers mentioning any holes dug or finding any dog prints. Granted, with a lot of chupacabra killings, there were also no prints found. But you get what I mean. Dogs potentially may be an explanation for most of the animal deaths. And again, obviously, dogs don't drink blood like snakes, but that whole drained of blood thing can be explained, which I will shortly, and it's the same explanation I gave in my chupacabra video. But anyway, moving on to the next potential creature that could have done this. Some suspected bats, and there were a bunch of bats that were found in a cave near to Moca, but after the species was examined, it was found that they were a fruit-eating kind, probably Antillean fruit-eating bats, which are adorable, and also small and harmless to people and livestock. There's just no way that they could have caused the wounds. On top of that, there really aren't any bat species that could have caused the wounds found on the victims, let alone completely drain them of blood. Vampire bats do exist, however, they don't kill their victims. They make small incisions on typically sleeping victims, and then they'll just lick up some blood until they're full, and then they leave. Victim stays alive. I mean, there's always a risk for disease like rabies, but other than that, nobody's turning up dead in the morning. What about the strange bird creature sightings? Maybe they have something to do with this. Well, it's kind of hard to really get much out of that, considering the witnesses weren't very descriptive, nor did they probably see much in the night. And I also don't have anything to go off of on terms of height or size or wingspan. So again, it's kind of hard to say for certain that this potential bird creature that was sighted by a couple people could have been responsible. Birds also don't drink blood. Well, actually, that's a lie. The vampire ground finch of the Galapagos does drink blood. However, it doesn't fit as the culprit, considering it's barely an inch big, and it doesn't kill its victims. It also creates small wounds with its sharp beak, hardly anything comparable to the wounds that were found on the actual victims of the Moca vampire. Maybe a larger bird of prey with its talons can create the holes in the victims of the Moca vampire. However, that doesn't address all the other stuff, including being drained of blood and the amount of victims. Some people believed that a vampire or vampiric beast was responsible for these animal deaths, considering the neck punctures or chest punctures and the animals allegedly being drained of blood. I say allegedly because of where all this information actually came from, which, quick sidebar, I'm just going to explain that. All the information for the Vampire of Moca actually came from one blog, and every other article about the Moca vampire I found seems to pull from this one blog, called Inexplicable. The blog's creator, Scott Corrales, was really the only one who did extensive research into the Moca vampire, and he's really the only source of information we have. Scott wrote that some of the victims were autopsied and it was found that they were drained of blood. However, unlike looking at the chupacabra stuff, several sources could corroborate whether or not autopsies were done. And with that video, you saw that the autopsied animals weren't actually drained of blood. So when I really only have one source telling me that some of the animals were autopsied and they were found drained of blood, I take it with a grain of salt. Okay, we're done with the sidebar. Let's get back into the Moca vampire stuff. Specifically, we're now going to talk about the whole being drained of blood. The thing about it is, like with my chupacabra video, if you recall, if an animal dies, the blood in its body will pool towards the flow of gravity. If an animal is, say, grabbed by the neck and it dies, and say it falls on its back and the hole is facing upwards. With the heart stopped, there's not going to be any blood gushing out of the wound, and all the blood is going to settle towards the back of the animal. And from there, the blood will eventually congeal into more of like a jelly-like substance and less of a liquid. So that if you were a farmer and you approach your animal, you could poke it, turn it over, move it around, hang it upside down, whatever. There's not going to be any blood leaking out of it. And to the untrained eye, you might think that your animal has been drained of blood, even though the blood's all still there, just pooled to one side of the animal. I really do believe that feral dogs were responsible for the animal deaths, given that feral dogs can kill, especially massive animals all at once, and not eat their bodies, and the whole blood pooling in one part of the body and then making the animal appear like it was drained of blood. It all kind of makes sense. However, feral dogs don't explain UFO sightings, and with the lack of detail on the UFO sightings and on really a lot of the animal deaths, it's honestly hard to say for sure what the explanation for the Moca vampire could be. I think feral dogs are a good fit for most, but not all of it. Maybe even a little bit of hysteria, like with the chupacabra, could have affected people. I'm not entirely sure. Like in the chupacabra video, I had a fun little theory. So for this one, I also have a fun little theory. I like to theorize that maybe an alien pet escaped, got onto Puerto Rico, started causing some havoc. The aliens tried recapturing it but failed. And then the US government rolled in, captured it, put it in a facility in Puerto Rico where it was researched and studied, where later it escaped and then caused more havoc, where it was either recaptured or killed by the government. But if it was recaptured, they probably removed it off of Puerto Rico, maybe taking it somewhere more secure. Maybe Area 51, who knows? I would like to know what you think of the Vampire of Moca. Do you have any theories of your own? Don't hesitate to let me know down in the comments. Maybe like the video while you're at it. And subscribe for more videos in the future. And until next time, mammals, remember, if you find yourself in Puerto Rico, maybe be wary of any vampiric creatures that may be lurking in the shadows, watching you from a distance.